The talk title today is A Fresh Perspective on Life. And I wanted to start by offering, I'm sure this is a paraphrase, but I once heard Deepak Chopra said something like this. When I realized Deepak Chopra was a fictitious character, I discovered freedom. And I've been leaning into that today, and it was coming up for me during the meditation and during the readings, this idea that we create our reality based on our perspective or our point of view. And those of us who are in New Thought, Ancient Wisdom teachings understand that in relative reality, everything is perspective. And then there's an ultimate reality that has so many names. The Buddhists would call it Buddha nature or true nature. Some in New Thought would call it Christ consciousness, essential beingness. Some of us simply use the word love, light, divinity. This knowing that the truth of who and what we are is changeless and eternal, and that in that reality with a capital R, meaning ultimate reality, there is no perspective. And I want to lean into that a bit because we are living in remarkable times. Now, we can say we're living in remarkable times any moment throughout human history, and that would be a profound and true statement. And so right now, we can say we are living in profound times if we look at what's happening in the world. And we can look at what's happening in the world through the lens of our personality self, or as Deepak said, the fictitious character that we have created that we call ourself, or we can look at it or be with it through the lens of oneness. And BJ let us know before the service started that tomorrow is World Oneness Day. And that touched something within me because we are at a time right now, and I don't think it's really actually any different than it's ever been. But one thing that I think is profoundly different is that we are more connected through technology and we have access to information more instantaneously. And we also have these little devices in our hands that, I mean, who would have imagined? I was thinking the other day about my grandmother being born in the early 1900s. And I was also reflecting on 1922 being 100 years ago and imagining a person that came into their life in 1922 and what the evolution has been in just 100 years. Who would have ever imagined? I mean, you know, Star Trek was showing us these little devices in our hands that were feeding us instantaneous information. Now, one of the things that is fascinating about having this information at our fingertips is who's providing the information. Is it a fictitious character that we have created? When we look at the unrest that's happening in the world, it might be very seductive or even provocative to create the hero and the villain. And we can easily find a reason to say, this is the person who is bad and this is the group who is good. And then if we reflect and take a moment and pause and invite the question, which I think is part of our freedom when we look at perspective and how we shift perspective, is to ask ourselves the question, is it possible to move beyond the paradigm of good and bad and right and wrong? And one way we can do this is to ask the question, have we been that in the world? We as a people, have we acted that way? Now, what does that even mean, we as a people? Because what does the mind hear when I say that? Something to notice. You might think of your city, your neighborhood, your race, your country of origin, the country you live in, the state you live in. There's all these different ways that we have decided that we are in separate groups. And because we have solidified the fictitious character, we have built coalitions around our beliefs, our countries, these imaginary borders that we've created, and then we're at war with the border. It's profound if we actually pause and look at it. And what is true collectively is also true individually. At some point in this service, whether it was a song or a reading, there was a conversation about the comfort zone. And the only way we can change is expanding that comfort zone. And one of the ways that we have been taught to find comfort is to find our group of people. We even do this sometimes in spiritual community when we talk about belief. Here are our 5 basic principles, and if you believe this, please join us. And there's something that's much deeper than that, and that is this move toward oneness. And just like I imagine someone born in 1922, fast forwarding to 2022 and seeing how we've evolved, I also imagine someone in the year 2022 going 100 years in the future and imagining all the different technological evolution and inventions, the way we expand that way. And what I want to invite is that what I hold to be true is that 100 years from now, we will have expanded our consciousness to become aware that we indeed are all one. That this is not simply an idea, but a way of being. To recognize that we are all actually particles of one source. Science is beginning to point to this. Mystics have been telling us this for thousands of years. And perhaps the Big Bang was the bang from source energy out into these incarnations. You know, we sometimes hear we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Our friend Michael Beckwith says we are spiritual beings having human incarnations. That's very different, right? Because we are actually spiritual beings here on planet Earth. The way I say it is, we are spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. And that the mind has been conditioned to believe in the other. And all war has always been distilled down to there is othering that happens, and we go to war with that other. And I want to explore that a little bit, because when I say that, we might think about countries, and we have countries at war on planet Earth right now. And we can look at the history of planet Earth, and there's almost always some kind of war happening based on othering in some way, either a war or a threat of war, a concern about war. And then we often talk about how we usher in peace, or we want to usher in peace. And many of us believe that peace is the idea that we are not at war. But true peace really isn't about not being at war. True peace is really about returning to our true nature and recognizing something much greater than just putting down the metaphorical or the literal guns or bombs. It is recognizing indeed that we are truly all one, and there's really no other to be at war with. Truly, the war that I'm in is the war with my own thoughts, which live in relative reality. In other words, it's not what's happening in the world, it's my thoughts about what's happening in the world that create suffering or create peace, create the idea of love or the idea of fear. And if we're tuned into mainstream media or the news, they will give us stories about why we should all be afraid. And I'm just going to say, for me, it has been really important for me over the last 2 years to turn all of that off. And I've had people say, well, how can you just bear your head that way? Isn't it important to know what's happening in the world? And my answer is yes and no, because the news isn't news at all. It's actually the same old story being propagated, othering and fear, othering and fear. So are there things that we need to be aware of? Of course. Are there things in relative reality like disease or war that we probably want to know about in order for us to have the idea of safety? But I say the idea because true safety for me gets created by knowing that there is something deeper than the division. And so what I want to spend a few moments on here is going a little more deeply into how we actually affect change in the world. And I'm going to quote Michael Beckwith again. He says, "We are not here to change the world. We are here to serve the new paradigm." Taking a moment with that, we're not here to save the world. Now, if you're anything like me, there has been at least a time in your life where that would have sounded preposterous. What do you mean we're not here to change the world? There's all these things happening in the world that need to change. And on some level, or one level of awareness, we can look to evidence to support that that is true. But when we shift from the idea that I must save the world to I'm here to serve the new paradigm, and the new paradigm is the paradigm of oneness, to recognize that there is literally no other, that we're all cells of one organism. If you look at the human body, and I'm going to just say right now, I'm not a doctor, a medical doctor, nor am I a biologist, but I understand in a very simple way that when the body has disease, the cells are fighting each other in some way. They're not working in harmony. And so we could look at ourselves. See, we call ourselves one. I am one person. But the truth is, we're all these different things that make up what we call the one person. Each of us is not just an individual. We're all of these cells that are creating the experience of what we call a person. And so if it's true that we're all one, if that is indeed the greater reality that we have been pointing to, that science is now starting to measure through the quantum field and quantum mechanics, what mystics and spiritual teachers have been saying to us and for us and with us for thousands of years, that changes everything. Because there is no other to save. There is nothing fundamentally wrong here. Or a different way to say it is, when I view it as bad or wrong, what gets created? So the way I work with this in my own life is, if I notice I go into a story of good or bad or right or wrong, I invite myself, instead of looking at what's right about something or wrong about something, I simply ask myself the question, what gets created when I blank? What gets created when I view this group of people as the other? What gets created when I look for the oneness? And if it's true that we're all one, or we're all cells of one organism, you see, I'm standing in my room now, my office, and there's probably at least one insect somewhere in this space. That insect has no way of conceiving, at least I don't imagine it has any way of conceiving, that I'm standing here in my office, Zooming, talking about oneness. It doesn't have the ability to understand what we're doing here, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. And so that's true of the human consciousness as well. I see myself as separate. I've been taught I'm separate. I have been taught I am my race, my age, my sexual orientation, my socioeconomic status. I'm from this family and this means this. I'm part of this religion and that means that. I am my opinions. And yet there's something much greater happening. And maybe we could say we don't even have the ability to comprehend it. And those of us who have been in spiritual practice understand at a deep level that maybe we don't understand it intellectually, but we have those moments where we touch reality, where we have the experience of oneness. And I've had that experience before, and I wanted it to last forever. And that was perhaps the ego wanting it to last forever. But instead, what I have discovered is that when I touched reality in that way, something shifted permanently. It wasn't in my mind, it was in my beingness. I had that experience, that touching of reality, and then everything changed. Then my mind came back and started opinionating again. And of course, it's been said, asking the mind to stop thinking is like asking the lungs to stop breathing or the heart to stop pumping blood. The mind is very powerful. It has thoughts, it sorts and separates. One of the things the mind does is constantly looking to see what's safe, who's safe, am I safe right now? And so if you look at it from a historical perspective, there was a time in our evolution when if we walked out of our caves, we might be eaten. So that mechanism was put in place for our own safety. And now we have evolved. Yes, we are animals. And so that animal instinct is still there. And we're also spiritual beings. So we can begin to recognize that the mind has a function, but when I believe I am my mind, or I am my thoughts, and I believe I am my opinions, that creates separation. And it becomes profoundly simple. When I believe that I am my opinions and my thoughts, I feel separate from you, and division is instantaneously created. And so back to the idea that we're not here to save the world, but we're here to serve the new paradigm. The greatest work that I can do to help the world is shifting my own consciousness, my own awareness of a greater reality that's beyond my thoughts. And so back to these little devices that are in our hands. What is often shared, and of course it's not the totality of what's shared on social media, is opinions. And we see it. We see it running rampant, especially it seems in the last 2 years. Issues around virus, issues around war, issues around race. All of it is important to be in, for us to be in conversation around. And yet what ends up happening quite often is we opinionate and then we put people in camps. And so I was having a conversation with someone who said, well, what's the actual solution with this? Because all of this sounds great. All of it sounds great. Yeah, we're one. But the reality is there are bombs being dropped. The reality is there are people who aren't caring enough for other people to protect them. And so in some way, it can become, it sounds really esoteric, but in another way, it becomes profoundly simple. When I believe I am my thoughts, I will instantly go into a story of good and bad and right and wrong. And when I go into a story of good and bad and right and wrong, for example, if I say something's bad here, what do I want to do? I want to change it or get rid of it. And that's what we've been doing for centuries on planet Earth. And so in addition to that, so I don't want, what I'm not saying is let's pretend like what's happening in the world isn't happening. What I'm not saying is let's turn away and pretend like we don't have a role in that. What I am saying is the work that we do in the physical reality, must, if we want to actually be part of serving the new paradigm, we start with the shift in consciousness. Am I viewing this as bad and I need to save someone? You are less than me and I need to save you in some way. Something's wrong here and I need to fix it. Or am I willing to pause, to actually feel the emotions that are present, that are connected with my opinionating, take a deep breath, actually feel that, tap into my true nature, do the work in consciousness that needs to happen for me to unlearn any ideas that I have about separation and division, connected very deeply with my true nature, which, by the way, we don't connect with our true nature. Our true nature is always here. We don't become enlightened. Enlightenment is revealed. It's our true nature. Who and what we are is an infinite being, capable of absolutely infinite possibilities. And yet most of us believe that that's not true. And we've been taught that's not true. And there's nothing right or wrong about that teaching, but what gets created when I believe that I have this limitation. And so in closing, what I want to offer is this. What I'm going to ask a question, and perhaps you reflect on this in your own life. How are you experiencing the world right now? Just notice what emerges as I ask that question. How are you experiencing it? What are you experiencing in your relationships? What are you experiencing with your viewpoints about what's happening in our world? And see if you can look at it without judgment. One of my favorite quotes, I swear, I think I probably say it every time I speak now, from Krishnamurti, who said the highest form of human intelligence is to see ourselves without judgment. Is there a different possibility for your life? Would you like more love, more connection, more openness, more abundance? Is it possible that the only thing that is preventing you from experiencing that is the idea that something is preventing you from experiencing that? What needs to be unlearned in this moment, questioned? What is it about your comfort zone that is both comfortable and also limiting? What would it take for you to expand that comfort zone, to question every point of view, to allow a greater reality to come into your awareness? In this moment, you are choosing, as I am choosing. We're all choosing every moment. The question is, are we choosing consciously or unconsciously? And if we're being run by the programs of the unconscious mind, we might not be able to understand that we have the ability to shift what we call reality. And when we recognize that true perspective, a fresh perspective on life, is actually not a perspective at all, it's a returning to our true nature. And it's being able to become the neutral observer to life. And then as we recognize that love is who we are, light is who we are, we then radiate that into the world, and we experience what we call a profound shift in consciousness. So what I want to invite in this moment is for us to just take a moment and move within. If it feels right for you, I invite you to gently close your eyes. And I invite us all to now take a nice deep conscious breath together. And on the exhale, simply tuning into the frequency of gratitude, grateful for our time together this afternoon, grateful for this reality that has been touched, this great knowing that it is true that each of us is a perfect expression, a perfect emanation of the one power and the one presence. And knowing that changes everything. And in this moment, we have had a profound shift in our awareness, a profound shift in our perspective about life. And because we know this to be true, we also know that as we go into our day, into our world, into our life, we go with a renewed sense of who and what we really are. And we radiate this into the world, knowing that this is how we serve the new paradigm. And we also know in the realm of spirit, it is already done. So we close out this time of reflection, of meditation, of affirmative prayer as we began with gratitude for this knowing. And just taking a few moments in the silence here to feel that frequency, that love energy that we are. And we lovingly release this. We let it go. We let it be. And so it is. Amen.
And so it is. Thank you so much, TJ. So everyone, let's go in and just take a deep breath and maybe just take a brief glance at this image in front of you. How beautiful and how perfect, and how it is the marriage of the day and the night, whether you call it sunrise or whether it's a picture of the twilight. It's just an example of the magnificence, the miracle of life, of God, of which we are a part inextricably. And so as you close your eyes, breathe deeply. Let your shoulders relax. Feel your posture straight and your feet upon the floor. We're going to focus on the subtle energy centers of the body called the chakras for today's meditation. Let's begin by imagining a grounding cord of beautiful white light just extending down from where you're sitting all the way through deeply into the earth, like the roots of a tree. And with each exhale, just feel yourself relax just a little bit more and let go of the cares and the worries and the conditions of the world for a moment as we go to the one true reality that is back of all things. And focusing on the color red and the area in your root chakra. Let's again imagine this grounding cord coming up into our bodies near our tailbone. And focus on the color red, a deep red as the embers of a fire just about to burn. The lava of creation, the first color of the rainbow. It's in this chakra that we find our grounding and our safety, our sanctuary. It's from this chakra that we emanate and animate into this existence. It's the energy from which all things begin. And now as we imagine shifting up into the area just below our belly button, let's just imagine this space called the Dan Dien. And the color orange of a rising sun. Breathing into this space and inviting all creativity, all nurturing energy. This is the place from which you give birth to ideas, new concepts, new thoughts. Where you have awareness of yourself. Let's expand this area with a glowing orange light. And just like a rising sun would rise, let's just bring this color a little higher into the center of our abdomen as we imagine the brilliant glow of a yellow sun. And almost picturing our hands just kind of rounding, facing up as we're kind of holding this energy of the sun. Expansive, a place of personal power. A power that is devoid of ego. And let's breathe and imagine this sun giving light to the green grass, and take that color green from the grass and the trees and nature and imbue it into the space of our heart chakra, the healing color, the healing tonality of the heart chakra, which bridges all chakras. And let's gently breathe from that space. This is the chakra from which love emanates, and love is both given and received. And that loving, healing power is the bridge between all chakras and all bodies, all layers of ourselves. It's the touch point into our connection with all beings. And as we take a breath, we let the healing light rise within us, picturing the sky blue color of our fifth chakra, our throat chakra, about communication, about listening, about teaching, about learning, about expression, like the perfect clear sky blue color of the midday sky. So as you breathe from this space, now let's bring our awareness higher into our sixth chakra, or our third eye, the place between our eyebrows, and imagine the color indigo as almost as if the color of the picture in front of us is coming into us, the color of a perfect twilight, as blue as the blue gets right before it starts to fade into the twinkling of the starlight. So let's imagine this area opening as we invite knowledge, perception, intuition, discernment, the spiritual eye, from which we can see the truth behind all things. And as we take a breath, let's just bring our awareness to the top of our heads, the crown chakra, the 1,000-petaled lotus, clear as a crystal. And imagine the light from that chakra just reaching out far, emanating, glowing. This is the space where the unity of all things is realized, where the reality of our physical and mental and emotional bodies blends into the layer of our spiritual highest selves. Let's breathe into this space and let it open like a flower. And now let us imagine the light, the golden light of a sun just coming through our crown chakra and descending and clarifying and healing and toning and opening up the flowers of all of our chakras. Let's allow that healing light to blend with our own energy. Now let's come back to the awareness of our heart chakra, picturing the color green in all of its brilliance, as we would find in a forest here, anywhere, as we would find in a forest in Ukraine or Russia. Let's imagine the love that we have for all beings on the planet, witnessing this nature together, witnessing our unity together. And let's stay in this place for just a minute of silence as we focus on love and peace for our fellow beings and for all life. And to close this meditation, let's take our hands and place them face down on the top of our legs, connecting with that grounding energy and that grounding cord again that connects us to the earth. I'm so grateful for this energy, for this life that represents us to us in myriad forms. I'm so grateful for all the lives that we touch. I'm so grateful for the unity that we send to all beings of the world, all around the world. And so it is.